Honorable participant, good morning. Before I start my presentation, allow me to thank Negeri Rempah Foundation for inviting me to share my knowledge about migration and cultural interaction in Southeast Asian archipelago in the past. I am honored to have the opportunity to share the historical background of the spice route on this forum. I believe that the dynamic of migration and cultural interaction in this archipelagic environment has made spices a catalyst for global trade and inspired the emergence of modern economic system. So it is worth to know the historical setting behind this route. Located between two continents and two oceans, the islands Southeast Asia have long been an arena for human migration and cultural interaction. History shows that this region has been a meeting point for diverse people and cultures since the arrival of early modern humans more than 80,000 years ago. Migrants from mainland Asia entered the region en route to Australia and New Guinea, either via the Sunda Self to the west or from the north through a chain of islands in the Wallace Zone. From time to time, the migration process seemed to continue unabated, and the process of interaction between cultures occurred dynamically. The meeting of diverse cultures, along with effort to adapt to such an exceptional environment, has resulted in a culture that is so diverse despite having fundamental similarities. That is what makes this region Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, or unity and diversity. The spice route was one of the results of complex migration process in this archipelago, which later developed into a means of establishing cultural interaction network and adapting to the natural environment. Differences in the natural environment where humans live mean that not all human needs were met. These needs led to the transport of material from one place to another and triggered the exchange of certain commodities. Archaeologically, the phenomenon of material transport and exchange began to appear initially at the end of the Pleistocene, at least since around 40,000 years ago. This is evidenced in the similarity in the use of material as well as in the form of the tools found in different islands. The pattern of cultural interaction in this region demonstrates increasing inter-community connection after 10,000 years ago. Closer ties occurred, particularly in the eastern region, in contrast to the western region. This is likely due to the greater flexibility of maritime network compared to land routes. The spread of banana, which were initially domesticated in Papua, to India and Africa, proves the existence of a very extensive network of connected communities since around 5,000 years ago. This is evidenced at least from traces of banana phytoliths discovered in the ancient port of Gadjah, Pakistan, dated to around 4000 BB, and in Naikang site, Cameroon, dated to 2500 BB. The period between 5000 to 3500 years ago witnessed the beginning of major migration wave of Austronesian speakers from Taiwan and southern China, especially into the eastern part of island Southeast Asia and Pacific. Other waves of migration came from the mainland Southeast Asia via Malay Peninsula and across the South China Sea to Western Indonesia. Austronesian speakers apparently established more networks due to their complex migration pattern. Once they had colonized an island, they maintained ties with their homeland while continuing to explore new areas. This was possible as they were able to adapt to the archipelagic environment by developing sophisticated maritime technology, which facilitated both return migration and the exploration of the new era. The migration pattern of early Austronesian speakers created a kind of globalization process. This pattern generated a network for the exchange of goods, people, and culture. Austronesian culture became dominant, including its language, which spread widely in Indo-Pacific area and even replaced Austroasiatic languages in Western Indonesia. During this stage, there are strong indications that the Austronesian speakers have established a very vast networking connecting Taiwan, island Southeast Asia, Eastern Polynesia to the east, South Asia, and Eastern Africa to the west. Eastern Austronesian pottery was introduced and then manufactured in Melanesia and Polynesia, while the obsidian from Bismarck Island in Melanesia was widely transferred through Austronesian network to Sabah in the west and Samoa Tonga in the east. This proved that long-distance exchange between those places has occurred at least around 3,500 pp. It is believed that through this same Austronesian network, exotic commodities from eastern Indonesia and Papua were introduced to the north and west. Among these commodities are obsidian, spices, sandalwood, bird feathers, and certain domesticated plants like banana, taro, lemon, mango, canary, and areca as well. Our research on Pulau Ai, Banda Island, successfully uncovered traces of nutmeg processing using Austronesian red slip pot. The pottery with nutmeg residue was excavated from layers dated back to more than 3,000 years ago. Obsidians were also found in the same site. Meanwhile, cloves has already reached Indian subcontinent before 2000 before present, and Mediterranean at least in the 1st century AD as mentioned by Pliny. Recently, results of archaeological research in Pakistan and India have added evidence of this long-distance exchange with the discovery of cultural material and plant remains that might have been brought by Austronesian sailors to the region, like in Sangakalu site, Kodiji, as well as Patanam in India. This archaeological evidence shows that there has been cultural interaction from Papua through island Southeast Asia to the Indian subcontinent, although not directly. The long-distance exchange gradually declined to become regional exchange. Such a regionalization commonly takes place after the peak of the global process has passed. At least 3 interrelated regional networks were formed in Southeast Asian islands at this stage. Apparently, the Western Austronesian network seemed to be more attached to the growing social and economic network connecting India and China via the South China Sea, while the Central Austronesian network was more connected to the Eastern network, which also encompassed Melanesia and Polynesia. In the northwest part of the island Southeast Asia, a network of cultural interaction was formed encompassing Taiwan, the Philippines, Vietnam, southern Thailand, and North Kalimantan. This network is known as the Sahwin-Kalane interaction sphere and is characterized by the same cultural material, particularly jade ornament or ling-ling-o, and pottery with specific motif. Around that time, innovation of metal technology emerged in Dong Son, North Vietnam. It soon became popular and spread widely to Southeast Asian islands and even as far as Melanesia. The metal artifacts was considered prestigious good as marker of high social status. The distribution of Dongsonian artifacts in island Southeast Asia suggests there were at least two distribution routes. The first is through the northern route from Vietnam to northern Indonesia by crossing the South China Sea, and the second through the southern route along the eastern coast of mainland Asia and Sumatra through Java Sea and up to Lake Sentani in Papua or even Laos in Melanesia. Slightly prior to the emergence of metal technology, megalithic culture characterized by the erection of stone monuments had already developed and spread widely throughout island Southeast Asia. The construction of megalithic building was also a manifestation of the builder's social status. The adoption of megalithic structures and Dongson bronze artifact as symbol of a person's success in the life indicate that a social change had taken place in this area. It seemed that predominantly material lineage in Austronesian society has shifted toward the patrilineal one. Such a social change was caused predictably by cultural interaction as well as adaptation to new social environment. Although the movement of goods from west to east and vice versa continues to occur, culturally there appear to be differences between the western and eastern part of the archipelago. This can be demonstrated by genetic evidence, material cultural characteristics, and linguistic use in those regions. The genetic markers of the population in the western part of the archipelago are closer to those of mainland Southeast Asia, while those in the eastern part are more similar to those of southern China or Taiwan. Similarly, in terms of pottery type, pottery decorated with stamp and chord mark techniques is widely used in the West, while in the East is characterized by red slip pottery. The same pattern can be seen as well in the distribution of languages, with Western Malayo-Polynesia in the West and Central Eastern Malayo-Polynesia and South Halmahera and New Guinea in the East. Furthermore, several bronze artifacts with facial decoration and specific megalithic form have only been found in the eastern part of Southeast Asian archipelago and not in the western part. On the contrary, evidence of cultural influence from India, which began to enter this region several centuries before Christ, only existed significantly in the Western Islands, with the boundaries line passing through Western Philippines, Western Sulawesi, and Sumbawa. The division between Eastern and Western Austronesian network was also confirmed by Chinese records, which recognized the Western network as Kunlun and the Eastern one as Chuanlun. The Chinese was more involved with Kunlun, whose sailors often visited China. On the contrary, Chuanlun was said to be located east of Bali and inhabited by uncivilized population with dark skin and curly hairs. Therefore, Chinese sailors are reluctant to sail to that area. Apparently, the division of the cultural network into Western and Eastern networks had a significant impact on long-distance trade. Certain commodities such as spices and other goods from the East could only be obtained through intermediaries who distributed them to the West. In fact, the Eastern region was often hidden by creating a negative image, as recorded in the Chinese historical sources mentioned previously. Later, when Europeans arrived in the Southeast Asian archipelago, they were able to access the Eastern network only because they were guided by Nusantara sailors. I hope that my very brief and simple presentation has provided some insight into the history of past human migration and cultural interaction that gave rise to the spice route. It is clear that in the past, spices route was not merely a means of fulfilling basic needs, but also a vehicle for cultural encounters to learn and understand one another, as well as enriching the culture of every nation that wishes to continue developing. It is hoped that the spirits brought by the spice route will now reborn to foster better global relations. Thank you.